Hey guys, my name is Dennis. I want to introduce you guys to our podcast called The Balanced Lens, where we talk about faith, culture, and politics from a Christian worldview. Now, you might ask yourself, in a world of millions of podcasts that talk about current events, you might be asking, why are we doing this? Our mission is to present intelligence, balanced perspectives about faith, culture, and politics from a Christian worldview, and hopefully with Christ-like compassion.
My name is Tijo. The reason I'm doing this is I'm a Christian. I'm a patriot. I love America. I'm also a father, and I believe that as a Christian, it is my responsibility to leave America in a best possible place so that my kids can inherit it. I think it's critical that we have conversations like this so that we can have open dialogue about what's going on in our country and in the world, and I come from it from a biblical point of view.
Hey, Biju Abraham, and I'm excited to be part of this podcast, which is intentionally called The Balanced Lens, and it seeks to provide a factual, unbiased, and balanced perspective on current events and the complex challenges we face in this world. One important goal for me is to inspire the audience to be critical thinkers who are able to dissect news in a nuanced manner and separate facts from noise.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is we are going to disagree with each other. We don't have a rehearsed script where we all agree on points, right? We're going to disagree with each other, and that's good. I think we want civil discourse. I know I have a bias. My bias is going to be towards the moderate right. I'm a moderate Republican. But I think acknowledging that helps us free us from that bias and hopefully see things with a balanced lens. That's our heart behind the podcast. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the first question. This has been dominating the news. It's everywhere. People are on fire talking about this topic, and it's Charlie Kirk, right? What was his impact and his legacy on American politics? It's been turbulent several weeks since his death. He left a legacy that is loved by some, hated by others. And so what are your thoughts on Charlie Kirk's legacy on American politics?
I think for me, Charlie Kirk, I've been listening to him for a few years now, especially around the last election. I found him, and I would like to play a video where Megan explains who Charlie is, and I think in a very profound and simple way.
Have you ever talked to Charlie Kirk?
No.
All right, let me tell you why I like Charlie. He's a whippersnapper. He's like in his young 30s. He is loathed by most establishment Republicans. And every time he comes on, they're like, ew, we hate him. I love him. He's really loathed by the left. He didn't go to college, was Don Jr.'s bagman in 2016.
No kidding.
Started Turning Point USA, and now he's a juggernaut. He is hosting conference after conference to generate enthusiasm amongst young people for conservative values. He knows Trump like a Trump whisperer. He can explain all things Trump to you. He's got a great sense of humor and an encyclopedic memory, and he's in the lion's den all the time fighting these wars. Have you ever talked to Charlie Kirk?
I think that video does a good job at explaining it. He was not loved by either side, partly because he tried to walk the line of reasoning. There were a lot of things that he did in his organization that people disagreed with. For example, he had members of the LGBT community on his staff that were conservative Christians. And for him, it wasn't about what your lifestyle choices were. It was, can you stand behind the values of a conservative, right platform that Turning Point stood for?
Yeah, so for me, right, I mean, when I observe the events over the last 2 weeks, there's no question that Charlie Kirk has and continues to touch the lives of many people, not just in the US, but around the world as well, right, in some places. But when we talk about legacy, in order to make a true assessment of anyone's legacy, it requires some time to pass. So what I would say is we'll need to observe how the next few years go and make a better assessment of what Charlie Kirk's legacy is going to be.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's undoubtedly, a powerful legacy. I'll say that it's one that I admire, but I don't idolize. He wasn't perfect by any standard. But here's what he did that was so powerful to me. He normalized this idea of having difficult conversations in difficult places, often with civility and respect. He resonated with millions, if not billions of people. You look at his stats on TikTok, it's incredible how many people watched his videos. Again, there are things that he said I don't agree with. He said things in a tone that I would not use, but I think it's logically unfair to call him a racist. It's logically unfair to call him a hate monger or white supremacist. People extract like 10-second clips or one sentence from his 3-hour podcast and create these formulations based on who he is. And I think that's logically unfair. Again, I don't agree with everything that he said, the tone he said it in. There are things I disagree with, but to categorize him as this hate-filled person, I think it's really unfair. The one cool effect of his legacy that I will say, and this is unexpected. To be honest, I hadn't listened to more than 5 minutes of Charlie Kirk until he was assassinated. And after I started watching him, I thought, wow, this guy was pretty bold. He was pretty courageous. But the unintended effect that I didn't see was people started going back to church and reading their Bible. I want to share this tweet with you guys. This is someone that posted on the Turning Point USA website here, or their Facebook group. This is a lady by the name of Melissa Gillen. She said, I admit that before that dreadful day, I had never heard of Charlie Kirk nor TPUSA. I listened to videos after his death was announced. I watched his memorial on Sunday and I became inspired. Because of all that I heard and witnessed, I made the decision to share about God every day. I will no longer be bashful about sharing the gospel. I've asked God to use me to his glory. And so, there are millions of stories, like that. And it's pretty incredible, right? To hear the number of people that have been inspired by their faith to read the Bible or go back to church or start sharing the gospel more. So I think that's a cool effect of his legacy that you should celebrate if you're a Christian, whether you liked him or not.
No, I think you bring up some good points about his legacy. I think like the second question will start addressing some of those topics.
Yeah. And the second question was really interesting. And the question is this, and this is debatable. Was Charlie Kirk, was he murdered? Was he assassinated? Or was he martyred? Right? Really interesting question. Was he murdered or assassinated or martyred? And depending on who you talk to on the left or the right,
Well,
it could be either one of those. So
even
what you guys
within
heard?
the left and the right, there's different sides of
Yeah.
that. Biju, you want to go first?
Yeah. So like I think to have a proper perspective, right? And this is like our goal here, right? To give a balance for you. We need to first start with the definitions. And I think, in my opinion, if you ask me what is the issue with society today and the conversations and why are we not able to have them properly, I think it's because people don't agree on the fundamental definitions or they do not know what they really are. There is an interpretation of the definition and they go with it. So let's talk about the definitions here, right? Murder is a legal term and it's defined as the unlawful and unlawful and intentional killing of one human being by another. So that's a legal term. Assassination, on the other hand, is a political or social term used when a prominent person is killed, usually for a political, religious, or ideological reason. Martyrdom is a symbolic term that is used when the death is endured for a cause, a principle, or a belief system, where the deceased is viewed as having died for their conviction. So this classification of martyrdom often depends on how supporters interpret and frame the death of the person. So those are the definitions, and that's why if you look around the world, no matter and there are people dying in different places around the world, one person calls them a terrorist, other person calls them a martyr, right? The same, let's take Osama bin Laden, right? As an extreme example. He's a martyr in many people's eyes. For us, he's a leader of a terrorist organization. So that gives you the contrast of the three words: murder, assassination, martyrdom. And note that all three can actually fit the death of a person. My view is that in Charlie Kirk's situation, we don't have all the facts fully determined and validated because they are still gathering evidence and the suspect is still undergoing due process. So from my perspective, I think it's too early to be 100% certain how this death fits into those categories.
Yeah. Dennis, do you want to play the first clip?
Sure.
Misleading. because you're basically trying to sell people.
When did you accept Christ?
5th grade at Christian Heritage Academy.
What
I
happened?
remember I heard a hot gospel, and I heard what happens if you don't give your life to Jesus. And it's very important that when we share the gospel, the modern gospel is God has this beautiful, amazing, wonderful life for you. And if you give your life to Christ, your life will infinitely improve. That is somewhat true, but it's very misleading because you're basically trying to sell people in Christianity of a life without difficulty, where the better way to teach the gospel is here's the 10 commandments. How many of these are you violating? Oh, you deserve to go to hell. And you probably will unless you give your life to Christ. That is the proper way to evangelize. And so I realized the stakes in 5th grade. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm a sinner. I'm selfish. I'm broken. And only thanks to Jesus' perfect sacrifice, coming and living a perfect life, that I get something I do not earn that has been given to me, this free gift of eternal life.
But when did
So in that first video, what I wanted to convey is in Charlie's own words, he is a self-described evangelical Christian that believes nothing you do in this world will account for your salvation. Nothing you say will help you to get to heaven, and accepting Jesus Christ is the only way to go to heaven. So at a fundamental core, he believed he was a Christian that is now under Jesus's lordship, right? Where he's willing to follow Jesus' instructions for life. And he did that in 5th grade, like you said. Can you play the second clip, Dennis?
Sure.
Amen.
Because there's a plan above us all. God, the question you asked me is, yes, before I go on a college campus, my prayer is very simple. God, use me for your will.
Amen.
Because there's a plan above us all. God is sovereign above all. The capacity and ability of our agency or action is very debatable. So what is God's plan when I go on a college campus? I just believe I will only tell truth. I will not compromise, and I'll love on the lost. All I care about is what I do. And what I do is I fight. And I know what God calls of us. So the specific teachings of Christ is go make disciples of all nations. I'm trying my best to do that. And I'm trying to do it first in this nation because this nation impacts every other nation on the planet. Jesus called us to love children. Jesus called us to tell truth. Jesus called us to contest in the public square for his purposes. So I care about what God thinks of me. I literally don't care about what people say about me. I couldn't care
How
less.
long did it take you to get to that point?
Years.
Yep.
It takes you in, and or you start to.
The reason I wanted to play the second clip, Turning Point USA was not a business plan. It was not a way that Charlie decided this is how I'm going to make money. His motivation, and he's talked about this in other places, his motivation for Turning Point USA was to have conversation with kids with the intent that through that he could bring them into a relationship with Jesus Christ, right? He used politics as a weapon and a logical point of stance, but his motivation was to serve Jesus. I think for me, it's pretty evident. He was martyred. It's not merely he was murdered. It's not merely he was assassinated. Because being murdered, someone kills you randomly. Being assassinated it's very political. You're killed because of your political stance. Being martyred is something much more profound. It's you are dying because of what you said or did for your faith. It is driven by the fact that he was killed because of what he was saying. And I don't think it is, and if you listen to clips after clip of his, openly talked about his faith, and I think that was convicting to people's hearts. As a Christian, I've led people to Christ, and most of the times I don't do the initial pass. Someone else lays the seeds in their hearts about Jesus, and they have questions, and I might be an add-on to that. But I think his purpose was someone that was completely blinded by the world to just tell them for maybe the first time in their life that Jesus loves them. He loved on the LGBT community. He loved on the transgender community. He loved on Democrats and people that were on the extreme right. He loved on Muslims, and he was really a seed planter that used the political stage as an open square to start having conversations. So for me, it's pretty clear that Charlie Kirk was a martyr.
Yeah, as far as that question, for me, he's someone I deeply admire. I think he was a martyr for conservatism, conservative values. but not a martyr for Christianity. And here's why. He took political stances that are outside of the realm of the Bible. It's clear. He talked about immigration. He talked about DE&I. He talked about schools and education and things that are important. The conservative movement, which he advocated for, it's a political movement. I don't want to diminish that. Politics is an extension of Christ's command to love one another. We engage in politics because we don't want that drunk driver driving on the road, killing an innocent civilian, right? Politics is important for Christians to engage in. So I don't want to diminish his role. The conservative movement, it's a wall of defense around traditional Christian values in this country. But he wasn't a traditional evangelist, a traditional missionary, a traditional pastor in that role as to see fit. And so, I'm calling him a martyr for conservatism, not for Christianity. And so for me, that's where I think the lines are drawn. Again, I admire him, courageous, bold, shared his faith, had the best of intent, right? Going into places that were dangerous all the time. He had death threats on his life literally every day. So, I don't want to diminish what he did there, but to nuance those definitions, I think it's important to differentiate the conservative movement from Christianity.
I would have to disagree. I don't think he did that. Like, listening to the entirety of his interviews that he's done in other places, I don't think he saw them as separate. I think he, even like having transgender people, so like a problem with the conservative Christian movement that was in politics, right? Like, if you look at the traditional people in the Republican Party, they would not tolerate any LGBT community members on their staff. And I think that is a grave mistake, because Jesus never cleans his fish before he catches them. He catches the fish first. And in that relationship with the individual is where they become clean, right? And Charlie understood this deeply, probably better than most, that you go after people and you win them over by talking about the love of Christ and understanding that there are sins in your life, not just the primary sins that traditional Christians point out, but like, in your heart, looking at another person, right, with lust is a sin. Jesus called that out clearly. And I don't think Charlie separated out those things. I think he just had a completely different approach to it.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think it's important for us to recognize that when it comes to politics, it's important, but it's not the supreme calling of the Christian. Again, I think we're called to engage in it because it's an extension of Christ's command to love one another. Politics gives us the freedom to share the gospel. Those things are immensely important. But, I think there's a differentiation there.
Yeah.
But again, someone I deeply admire.
Yeah, I want to be clear. Like, I'm not calling the man a saint, right? Like, I don't I want to profess that he didn't do anything wrong. So there's countless times where he himself admitted that he belittled people and he regrets it. In the heat of the debate, he lost his temper. I'm not calling him a saint, but I'm saying he died because he loved Jesus.
Undoubtedly, I think his
Yeah.
commitment there was clear, for sure.
And to circle back, right, to the definition, it's a symbolic term and it's a supporters who deem whether it's a martyr or not. So we can all be right and say different things because it's not a legal definition like a murder. He was murdered. That is clear and everybody has to agree to it.
Right. No, that's a great point. And so, yeah, this conversation is going to continue. Charlie Kirk's not leaving the news anytime soon. So there's a lot going on in the world following his death and the political activism that is growing after that. Moving on to the next topic. It's been something that's been in the news now for the last, I guess, almost 3 years. The war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Public opinion now seems to have turned where many people believe that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. This all started, at least this near-term war, started back on October 7th, 2023, when Hamas essentially invaded Israel, raping, abducting, kidnapping hostages, causing havoc on Israel's infrastructure, really, and starting a war. So are they committing genocide now? The IDF controls 75% of the Gaza Strip. What's happening?
Yeah, if I may, let me start with the definitions again, only because this is a loaded term, right? So it's a complicated question and everybody has very strong opinions on it. So the definition, right? So according to the 1948 Genocide Convention, in Article 2, genocide happens when any of the following acts are committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. So these are the acts that are listed. Killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So this is the legal definition that is there. Now, one of the things that you will note very clearly, like there are serious gray areas in this definition. For example, like it is very hard to establish intent to destroy a group. So most often, this is inferred from patterns of conduct that happens. Second gray area, when you say in part, how much of the population is that? 1%? 10? 50%? We don't know. And the another gray area is like, are Palestinians a distinct national group under the convention? It's not clear. So just wanted to put the definition out there. I'll make some comments later, but I wanted to start off with the definition of what it is and how gray it is. And this will explain to you why people have different views on what is happening with
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's pretty cut and dry. I don't think they're committing genocide. I think they're at war, and war is not pretty, and there are casualties. You can't be in a population of 2 million people in the space that they're in and not expect human casualty. Like, what number of human casualty is acceptable when you're in war? Like, 0 is not the answer. So, like, what number? Actually, if you want to play that clip where Charlie Kirk actually was talking about it, I think it's a good clip to kind of summarize what's going on.
Sure, and this is a clip of him actually debating a student on the topic of Israel and Palestine here. So
Let me ask you, in the conflict of Israel versus Hamas, who's the good guy?
I believe both Hamas and the Israeli government are evil, but I think also that there is no justification.
Are they equally?
There is no justification for the murder and mutilation of thousands of innocent people and children.
Let's
The futile.
let's zero in on.
There is no justification, Mr. Kirk, for invading hospitals, for bombing innocent populations, and dragging out a war which is damaging Israel and the West's security.
You've made that point, but
It's not a point; it's a moral truth, isn't
okay,
it?
yeah. It was also a moral truth that the war started because 1,300 Jews were killed and 200 were taken hostage. And when you declare war on Israel, expect a firestorm in reaction. Let me finish. I let you talk. Israel, at its holiest day of the calendar year, besides Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, Samat Torah, the 50-year anniversary of the Six-Day War. On Shabbat, Hamas invaded Israel, deciding to go recklessly to music concerts, to homes, to kibbutzes, and taking 200 plus hostages. They knew what they were doing. In one of the most cloistered urban environments on the planet, 2 million people live in a place where it's impossible to wage war. Impossible. Where they wear civilian clothing, they violate every tenet of the Geneva Convention, and the IDF, when they do something right, they get no credit. When they do life-saving surgeries of a Gazan child, they get no credit. When they drop leaflets, they get no credit. But when they happen to bomb a place where they are operating their military from, which we now know from third-party verified sources, hundreds of Hamas military operations are in mosques, schools, and hospitals. I'm sorry, the country where they were living in relative peace on October 6th, that all of a sudden we had a war and Hamas started the war. And I don't see people that were really upset about the 2 million Germans that were killed in World War II, civilians. A tragic truth of war is that civilians die. I don't like it and you don't like it. And they brought it upon themselves. The only operation and entity to blame is the leadership of Hamas, not the Israeli government, for fighting this defensive war after they were invaded. There is a good guy and there is a bad guy. I honestly...
Isn't that the morality of a child?
Well, hold on.
You can pause it. The debate goes on. For me, it's like if you take a stick and you poke a bear that has kids, and you matter of fact kill one of the kids of the bear, expect the bear to attack back. It is mind-boggling to me why we would allow Hamas propaganda, which on the first day, on October 7th, when they were doing this, they were recording themselves as the victims. Like, that was their agenda from the very beginning, to now drag off. All the numbers that we got for what's happening in Gaza was from Hamas. Hamas's charter is to destroy Israel. Like, How do you negotiate with that? When you're on one side of that, how do you negotiate with it? There is no negotiation when you are coming out and saying, I want the other side completely dead. Otherwise, there is no peace, right? And I hate to say it, the only way to settle this is to take Hamas out of power and return the Palestinian area, that Gaza, back to the Palestinians, which I'm pretty sure is in Israel's plan. They did it back in 2007 when they returned it back, and unfortunately, the Palestinian people voted in Hamas as their leadership. And I think that's silly to call out genocide when you're in the middle of a war. And we know, like Charlie said in the video, third party sources have proven that the places where the IDF is attacking, Hamas was operating out of. Now, there are cases where they attack places where they suspected Hamas to be attacking, and they weren't there. But it's hard to know which is which. And even in those places, I believe there's video footage of Hamas shooting rockets from there. So it's like you don't know where these tunnels come up and end. So I don't know. For me, it's pretty clear that they're not committing genocide. They're just in the middle of a very bloody war.
Yeah, I think, I'll add on to that, and I'll take a step back, right, from war. Life is precious in the sight of God, right? Whether you're Israeli or Palestinian, even Hamas, you're made in the image of God, the imago Deo. But this is a war, right? And in a war, there's no winner. There are losers and people that lose more. But I do want to make this point. There's a clear terrorist in this war. It's Hamas. Hamas has a history of being a terrorist organization. It's explicitly written in the charter. You can go Google it and look it up. Their goal is the destruction of Israel. Hamas still holds hostages. As of September 2025, they hold 48 hostages that are still remain to be somewhere in Gaza. Some have been declared dead, but there are some that are still alive. Hamas still governs parts of the Gaza Strip. They still engage in guerrilla warfare in some areas of Gaza, and they still sabotage supply lines of food. I want you to take a look at this video here that I want to share, and you'll clearly see what's happening, what's going on here. This is a post on Twitter by Cheryl Wrote It. Caption is, what happens when the UN does decide to distribute just one aid truck out of over 950 delivered by Israel to the middle of Gaza. Watch and let the world see for themselves. And essentially what's happening in this video, you see Hamas beating up Gazans. So you clearly see, on top of that truck, men with rifles literally hitting people, taking aid. And so this humanitarian crisis, quote unquote, is being used or being catalyzed by Hamas to essentially create propaganda, like we see in the news today. And so my take on that is similar. We need to get rid of Hamas as a governing structure or as an entity.
And
Yeah.
I think that's a good point you made. Like, they still have hostages. Well, like, after all this ground fair, after all this bloodshed, and like, I don't think the American general community that reads the CNN headlines really understands the fact that it's not like Israel completely controls that area and now they are going in and systematically trying to kill people, right? That's not the case. Hamas still owns whole portions of the Gaza Strip, and they're holding hostages. If they want to start negotiating peace, go back to when you started the war and say, I'm sorry, here's your people back, right? Like, that would be a good effort to start peace. How can you possibly have peace when literally, in my bear analogy, you attack a bear with 3 cubs where you kill one and then you take another one and you try to run off and the bear's chasing you down? Like, give the cub back. I think it's just so silly. I mean, this topic gets me so heated because there's a lot of history that people overlook. Israel has tried repeatedly to have peace with the Palestinian people, and things were going really good. Go back to the pictures of before in 2007 when Israel handed over Gaza strips and other parts back to the people that were in that area. They had infrastructure, things were good, and then Hamas moved in and it just went to hell.
Yeah. So like you guys are right. Like it's a complicated topic, right? So like if I were to throw in some numbers, and just as a caveat, right, some of them are hotly debated, estimates are sometimes all over the place, but roughly we're talking about a population in Gaza of 2.1 million people. The estimates of those who have been killed so far is about 65,000 plus, right? So we are talking about, what, about 3% or so of the population who's died as a result of the war. Like, there are some more things, right? So one of the problems is, like, again, there are estimates are like very varying. You have about the number of Hamas fighting men that were there is about 20 to 30K when the start of the war. Israel took out a good chunk of them. Estimates vary again, but roughly about 10K is what they agree on. There was a leaked memo recently on that. But the sad part is, like, Hamas has recruited, and, like, from what I've seen, they are back to the same capacity of what they were when they started the war. So to answer your direct question about genocide, that's why I gave the definition, and you can clearly see there is a gray area, and this is why this has been discussed in the United Nations, and you've got different views on it. It's it's just one of those sad things where if you look at how many people have died, the proportion of people, and how this is a very strategic warfare for Hamas. And the question for Israel is this strategy they're using, because their stated goal is to destroy and completely eliminate Hamas. It doesn't seem like they are anywhere near that goal based on what's happening on the ground today. And part of the problem is that this is an ideology as well, right? If they continue to teach the next generation about why they believe in their cause and Israel is the enemy, this is just going to perpetuate. Part of the problem is, like, Israel has to, and the world has to figure out a way how to win the hearts and minds of people. And brute force may be part of the strategy, but it cannot be the entire strategy.
Yeah, I think you can't start rebuilding until there is a platform to rebuild, right? Like I think it's heart-wrenching. Some of the videos you see on TikTok and YouTube and Facebook where you see kids trying to hold their parents and the casualty of war, it is heart-wrenching. And I completely understand that sentiment. And as a Christian, it breaks my heart to think these people are dying. And I don't know how they're going through it or how I would react, right? But on an equal footing, if Israel laid down all of their weapons and said, we will not fight anymore, will there be peace? And the answer is clearly no. There will not be peace if Israel just decides to lay down all of their weapons. Hamas will just come in and kill them. And so you can only negotiate peace from a position of power. If you have the power to push back and you have the power to set the rules, you can establish peace. Now, some might look at that and say, like, well, that's one-sided, right? Peace is one-sided. It takes the strong to say we're not fighting anymore, that this is how we're going to do it. We did that in World War I. We did that in World War II. Any war where, look at the surrender of Japan when the U.S. attacked it. We killed millions of innocent people. But at the end, we came in, we rebuilt, and now their economy is great and they're doing fantastic. Not saying you take away from the lives that were taken, but you cannot establish peace without one side being ready to say that we will not fight and the other side agreeing, okay, we're done fighting. And that will not happen with Hamas in power.
Yeah, and innocent people die in war, but Israel is the only contender in war that I've known that actually announces an attack before they're actually going to attack someone. So I want to share a video here. This here is from Dr. Eli David. He's on Twitter. And this has been pretty common in the war. Before Israel attacks an area, they drop leaflets. Here, this is Gaza City. They're giving them a final evacuation notice before Israeli forces move in. So that paper is the leaflet just coming down. So again, Why are they in Gaza City? It's a highly populated area. They're not there to kill innocent civilians. Hamas hides their infrastructure in densely populated civilian areas. That's their strategy of war. Fortunately, it's in the middle of civilian neighborhoods, and I think the world needs to see that. If we're going to say Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, let's ask ourselves, why is Hamas still holding hostages? Why is their infrastructure set up in civilian areas? Why are they still, firing and, maintaining their position in this war? So I think there's still a war that's going on between two sides here.
And just to clarify, the practice of dropping leaflets is not unique to Israel. It's been done during the Gulf War, the Korean War, the World Wars. It's not uncommon. I just wanted to clarify that. So, but yeah, those are the arguments, right? I mean, you've got on the one side like people who say that it is not genocide. Will say that Israel's stated military goal is like to dismantle Hamas, right? And it's a self-defense. It was initiated after October 7. And Israel has made efforts to mitigate civilian casualties as much as they can. But on the other side, they say, well, sure, but if you listen to the rhetoric from some of the public officials and leaders, it clearly you can hear that they imply the intent of committing genocide. And then there is a disproportionate use of force and the utter destruction of the infrastructure, like 70+% of all the buildings, it's all gone. So if you then go back to the definition of genocide, you can argue why some people will say that it fits in there. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but the definition of genocide makes it so gray that you can make it fit or not fit, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. Israel's not innocent in this war. I don't think any government entity in the world is innocent. Every government is evil. There are some that are more evil and less evil. I don't want to equivocate them with Hamas either, right? So they're not innocent in this war. But are they committing genocide? I agree with you guys. I don't see the evidence for that. We're going to have a final round of thoughts. Biju, you want to give a final statement here?
Just in general, I think it is worth it to have a broader discussion, because this genocide discussion was it's a very focused question. And like I said, the definition, it makes it very vague that you could argue either side. I think it's worth it for us to think through what are the scenarios of peace. Like, not that others haven't, but let's have a session where we have a blue sky thinking. What is the ideal method of peace? Like, I know, like, for example, Trump gave a completely tangential suggestion of making that whole strip like a wonderful place, a strip of hotels and whatever, right? But it at least introduces the idea of something totally different. And I think it's worth it for us to discuss, like, well, if the goal is peace, how can that be achieved? And is Israel achieving it? Are they closer to their goal today than they were 2 years ago, is a question.
Excellent.
I think we have to ask, why is a place the size of New Jersey, where there's 10 million, 10, 15 million people living, the source of the world's frustration? There's billions of people that surround that area where there are Muslims committing atrocities. Go to India and look at the Hindu population persecuting Christians and Muslims there. There's so much atrocity in the world that you have to stop and wonder, why is the world so concerned with what's going on in a place the size of New Jersey with 10, 15 million people? And I think if you start asking, and like there's worse atrocities. There's actual genocides happening in Africa and Armenia. Like, none of those things get popularized in American politics. So I would ask the listeners to ask themselves the question, why this particular area? Why is it such a heated topic in the American political space?
Yeah, awesome thoughts. I think one thing we can all agree on is life is precious in the sight of God. Both sides, right? Whether you're Palestinian or Israeli, and we should pray for an end to the war and pray for God's mercy to a quick and swift conclusion, even though it's been 3 years. Anyway, thank you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed our first podcast here. I want to invite you guys back to our second episode of The Balance Lens next week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.